Hey guys, and welcome to Edge of the Bed podcast. I'd like to thank anyone who has joined me here today, whether you watched an episode before or whether this is the first time you've joined us. If you've seen the last episode with Jeremy, I want to thank anyone who supported that episode. It received so much support for Jeremy and me, and and my pages have just sort of grown quite a lot this last few weeks, and I just want to thank anyone who has contributed towards that. We're all in it together to make change, I guess, and that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to open up conversation. We're trying to make abuse more of an open topic, because I believe that is the best way we can make change as survivors. So yeah, I'm really excited for today's guest. He's called Forrest Lang. He is an author and such an inspirational guy. His strength throughout his story, you'll hear, is just crazy. I've never known or heard of anyone like this guy and what he's been through. I just hope you all enjoy, and let's get right into it. Thank you for coming on, first of all. You've got a lot larger platform than me, and it's very nice of you to sort of come onto my platform and speak to me, so and share your story to sort of the people that listen to me as well, because I'm sure it'll be very influential on many different survivors, many different people, because I've got to say, you have been through a lot, Forrest. Reading your book, you've been through quite a bit, and I'm sure many people can relate to sort of the little bits within there. So just thank you first of all for coming on.
Well, it's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, and so you sent over your book to me, and instantly the first page just got me hooked, and I've just been reading it the past couple of days non-stop. So what sort of inspired you to write your book, like going from where you are now? What sort of made you want to look back and write all that up?
Well, so the whole purpose of Angel Blue is to share how I recovered, and I always kind of knew that I would want to share my story, but I decided kind of earlier in life that I really wanted to wait until I had something to say, something positive to say, something that I have done, something I had achieved, and I knew that the wreck of my childhood, and I knew it was semi severe, but I didn't know how severe until I really started writing it. And I waited until I got to a place where I felt like I was the guy that I could look up to when I was 14 years old.
Mm.
And I felt, when the time was right to start writing it, I felt um, so incredibly driven to write and complete that memoir that it almost felt like an assignment from elsewhere. So I can't really explain 100% what drove me to write that, other than a sincere desire to share my recovery with others in a language that's non-academic, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, and that was definitely one thing that I noticed that I liked as well. It was like it felt real, and it felt like it was coming from, such an authentic place. And I just love the way it's wrote. It's different to anything I've read before, and yeah, I love it. But one of the things I noticed from your life, of what I've read, is the relationship with your mum seemed to be sort of one of the sort of key things in your life that led your life to where it went, if that makes sense. Um, so what do you sort of remember from the relationship with your mum?
Unfortunately, I remember it all now after writing it. And my mother uh, is, I assume if she's still around, a very mentally ill person, um, and a person who suffered a lot. And I think the world was dangerous and scary to her. And she heavily abused me. Um, I don't necessarily think that she's evil or bad. Um, but some of the things that she did were evil and bad. And I don't think there's a lot of evil, like truly evil or truly ill-intentioned people in the world. There are some, uh, but I think most people are not. Um, I've learned through the process of leaning into recovery and going and attending personal growth courses and practicing the one of the five pillars of servant leadership, which is study. Um, I've learned and I believe from my experience that most of the human subconscious, like the drivers, who I will marry, what kind of job I will have, how I will live, how I feel, what I believe I'm worthy of, is programmed by the age of 8 years old. And so it's incredibly important how we raise our children up until the age of 8. Now, for me, I was getting beaten. We were eating out of garbage cans. My mother was a sex worker until she married my stepfather, and I was getting molested by my older brother. And there was a constant state of terror in my home. And so the programming that I got from the age of 0 to 8 programmed me to believe that the world was dangerous, that I was not safe, that people were out to get me, that people would take from me, and that if I wasn't violent and very protective of my own everything up to including my own body, that it would be exploited. So that effect still sits with me today at 43 years old, but I'm able to consistently adjust that programming. So how did my mother affect my life? She could have ruined my life. I'm supposed to be dead. I'm supposed to be incarcerated. I'm supposed to be uh, on the street with a needle in my arm or drinking out of a brown bag, statistically, with that kind of programming. But I'm lucky because I got a lot of treatment. I had a lot of help and love from the world once I left foster care at 16.
And that is what is so kind of unique about you, Forrest, is that most of the people that have been through the things you've been through are either not here, they're in jail, or things like that. So there's a lot of strength within you to persevere through all that, and respect to you for getting through that, and respect to you for writing it all up and wanting to help others. So
You know, I did some things earlier in my youth that I'm really not proud of. I was acting, there's a saying, hurt people, and heal people. Well, and I think that there's a spectrum to that too. People who are hurt a lot severely tend to be very severely hurtful to other people. People who have healed severely tend to be more severely healing for other people, because human beings, we're basically we're monkeys. We copy what each other do. We we follow what, okay, this person's doing this, I should go do that, and we're a little more complex uh, due to our level of awareness or our kind of awareness. But the best thing I can do for the world is heal myself from these things.
yeah, for sure. And so going back to sort of your relationship with your mom, you mentioned that she was a sex worker, and people were coming in and out of the house. What was your experience like with that?
I was pre 4 years old, four, maybe five and younger when that was happening. And so the memories and recollections I have are very vague, of just being left in random places, strange men in my house, a man driving by the house and leaving a present, and me going outside and wanting to take the present, and my mother taking it and throwing it in the street. No, you can't have that. So it's very vague. There's a very vague feeling of instability, invasion, lack of safety. Because she got sober when I was 5 and married my stepfather. So, it's difficult to, maybe we can do better under hypnosis, but to really remember that much. you know.
When your mum met your stepfather, did sort of her behavior towards you improve, or what happened with that relationship then when there was someone else in the picture?
If the behavior ever really improved, she was very unpredictable. And so sometimes she would be very sweet and nice, and other times she would rage and hit me and do play weird games like psychological games, and lots of slaps and lots of shaming. And I mean, I'm doing this really cool uh, treatment. It's called EMDR, and I still have very clear memories that'll surface out of back then. So there was one that came to the surface. It started to bother me, and it was when I was crying, and my mother was slapping me across the face, telling me to shut up, stop crying, slap, and it went on for a while because when you're young, it's hard to stop crying, especially if somebody's hitting you. And I took a deep breath and learned how to hold and push that down and push that in, which is a lifelong unhealthy coping mechanism for grief or anger or um, so it was horrible. It was horrible. There were times when she was nice and sweet, but I remember the worst stuff. We all remember the worst stuff, man. If you're if I was to be graduating from college, right, and I had all this culmination of all these years of hard work, and I'm walking through the graduation line, and 100 people walked through the line and got their diploma, and one person got to the front to take their diploma and blew their brains out. Guess what I'm going to remember? I mean, negative trauma has a way deeper imprint than the positive or regular or norms. So most of the imprints from my childhood are very traumatic. EMDR is great though, because it gives a person an ability to process through. I think of things in metaphor. I'm not very highly educated. I dropped out of high school in ninth grade and I took some art class in college. So my education is more from like leaning on people who have been formally educated. And so trauma can build up in our mind. I like to use a lot of metaphors like a clogged pipe, right? So if there's a pipe and there's all this material trying to get through this pipe and it just gets clogged, um, we can get stuck. We can get stuck and we can bury it back, and it just doesn't flow through and doesn't process. What EMDR does is stir through the mud and let that material flow through the pipe, and our own brain does the processing. So I've been doing a lot of that lately.
Mm. And how does that work out? What are the steps in that treatment?
It's done with a therapist, and my experience of it is to be in session. Today in today's world, our little glitch in the matrix where it's on telehealth. So I use eye movement. So the therapist will guide me through how does this thing make you feel? Where do you feel it in your body? What is the intensity on a scale of 0 to 10? Now I want you to focus on this particular part aspect of that trauma and move your eyes back and forth as far as you can go. And it's very difficult. When I do that, I start to cry. I clench my fists. I really feel that that horror or that traumatic event or that pain or that anger, and then it releases. So I was telling this kind woman who's my therapist right now, guiding me through MDR, that I feel like sometimes my mind is like the roof of the Chernobyl power plant after it exploded, and there's a lot of material, like there's a lot of radioactive material to scoop back in.
Yeah.
Far off on tangents, man. When you ask me questions, I just have a lot to say.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's great. Yeah. I was just gonna ask, like, what do you think the baseline between sort of re-traumatizing yourself and actually dealing with, trauma? What do you think that baseline is?
For me, the baseline is going and doing that stuff with a therapist that I trust. Not every therapist is great. Those people are well trained to handle processing of trauma. Unfortunately, there's because there's such a shortage in therapists and mental health, there's a lot of home remedy type stuff happening, especially on Instagram, with people, and sometimes people who are untrained can take on a role as a provider. So I think for myself, I make sure that the person that I'm processing that trauma with is qualified, because just recounting trauma can spin people and me into a spiral and can cause more damage. So, in a controlled environment with somebody who's a trusted professional.
Yeah. So going back a little bit to your story, so your mum's met your stepfather. She's still very unpredictable in her moods and stuff like that. What sort of went on from there in your life?
Well, my older brother was still molesting me, and my mother started having my stepdad beat me pretty severely, along with my other brother and the one who was a who was a child molester. And after a little while, my little brother was born. My stepfather and my mother, their biological child, he became a golden child in a sick dynamic where he would eat, I wouldn't. I would get punished for things he did. It was just very dark and sick environment. And eventually, I got taken away by Child Protective Services. I don't know what you guys call it in England, if it's the same thing.
Y- yeah, pretty much the same thing.
I went to a series of group homes and foster homes, and just kind of back to my mother's, back to foster home, running away, and I ended up getting placed with a woman who was a pedophile drug dealer. She became my foster mother, and the horror continued. Now, it seemed nice when I was 12, because here was a person who bought me clothes, who was nice to me, who acted like they cared about me, but in reality, this person was a predator. And I was there until I was 16. I started to drink to cope. And when I was 16 years old, that woman had tried to kill me in a murder suicide. And I stepped out of that house and stayed with friends. The first night I slept on a park bench, and I stayed with friends pretty much until I joined the Navy at 18.
And so you mentioned about your brother molesting you. What are your feelings towards that situation now? Now knowing that your brother was molested too, correct?
Yeah.
Um, and him being a child, what are your feelings?
Well, I think that maybe he could have been saved if he had had some help. Um, obviously, I feel anger. I feel um, affected. I mean, he was 3 years older than me. Um, the things that he did to me, he would have gone to jail for now. Even as a kid, he would have gone to juvenile hall and gotten into counseling and gotten some help. Um, I, it's easier to forgive him for doing those things to me when I was a kid than it is to have knowledge of what he's done as an adult. Um, so I feel nothing for that man. I'm not interested in any kind of relationship with him, or any kind of. But I also, forgiveness. All forgiveness is clearing of resentment and abandoning revenge. So I'm able to forgive. It doesn't make what he did okay. It doesn't make who he is okay. What he's done okay. But it's just not my responsibility to punish him. And uh, that's what's made forgiveness around those kinds of things a lot easier for me, is really truly understanding what it is. Uh, People used to tell me that forgiveness was God, forgiveness was love, forgiveness was forgetting, forgiveness was rebuilding relationship with the person, and that's not what forgiveness is at all. So I walk in forgiveness.
Mm. And I guess that's a way of relieving some of the weight on you, like you said. So yeah, great way to deal with that. Um, and when you went into child care services, is it called?
Child
Do you
protective.
remember child protective services? Do you remember, like, did you feel relieved? Was it yeah? What were your emotions around that time?
I did feel some relief. I felt a lot of fear. Um, the beatings and stuff had intensified. My mother's behavior had intensified in a bad way. And I was pretty shell shocked when I first got into foster care. I mean, I slept with my clothes on, including my shoes, because I wanted to be able to run, which I didn't understand why anything about that at 12 years old, why I was feeling the need to be able to run away. But I had PTSD at 12.
Wow. And you mentioned meeting your foster care or foster mother, whatever. And what was her name? Gilda, is it?
Gilda was how you
Gilda.
pronounce it.
Yeah. And sort of go through how that relationship started was you mentioned it went on to be abusive, but how did the relationship start?
Started in a friendly way, with just a little bit of extra attention given to me. Um, the way that predators work is they inch their way in. They don't just pounce, especially when there's a likelihood of a person getting away. Um, so Gilda inched her way closer to me in every way, and sort of romanced me. Um, and then once she was all the way in uh, to my life and my body, and then she developed ways to keep me close to her, like trapped and stuck. If anyone finds out what we do, we'll go to jail. Here's cigarettes. You can have two. That way I know you'll be back because you're addicted. Just a web of, I don't know if that was learned behavior. I don't know if um, this woman calculated consciously what she was doing or if she was repeating things. I don't know. But it was slow going. And then by the end, it was either get away or I was going to die.
Mhm.
And that was 4 years.
Do you remember the moment sort of it began to escalate in ways that became scary and life threatening?
Yeah. Um, I had started to spend nights out away from my foster home. And my foster mother told me we were going to take a drive. And I had been suicidal. I had cut my wrists. I had been drinking daily, taking a lot of risks. And she was driving at a high rate of speed, running red lights, and told me that she was going to drive us off of a cliff. Um, we were in a part of Southern California, and Point Magoo was a place where there was a rock and a cliff you could drive off of, and it was a pretty decent drop. And at that moment, because she was a very small person, she couldn't inflict physical violence on me. It was more mental. Um, and so at that point, I put my foot on the brake and led the car to a stop, jammed it in park, took the keys, threw them in a field, and I ran. And at that point, I believed that if she had the opportunity, she would kill me.
From that moment on.
From that moment on.
Mm. And so where did you go from that point? So you ran away and did you know where you was gonna go, or was it just I'd rather be anywhere but with this person?
I just had nowhere to go.
Mm.
And I very clearly recollect. I mean, I would have been a sophomore in high school. I had tested out, and I was taking art classes at the community college. And I very clearly, clear as day, remember taking a shower at my friend's house and sitting down in a shower and just being so tired and exhausted and thinking about how I had no hope, no hope. There was nobody in the world who loved me. I had no parents. I had friends and friends' parents who were willing to give me charity, make sure I ate, but I had no car. I had a job at Sears in the basement, restocking, not making enough money to live. I believed that my future was headed absolutely nowhere. I was headed nowhere. And there was no hope for me to ever have a good life. And that thought exhausted me. I was just exhausted, thinking about how how would I ever get out of this situation. And I was in a kind of half-assed street gang, and I was drinking a lot, and I think I just was hoping to get shot on the street or um, die in some way. That way the pain could be over.
And so you were sort of couch surfing at the time, would you call it? Living with friends and what happened from how did you sort of get out of that situation that you was
Well,
talking about?
I went back to live with my biological mother for a little while. I had buried everything that she did, and she actually found me on the street. I was walking, and I guess she had been driving around the streets of Oxnard looking for me. And I went to live with her in another town, and long enough to put on some weight. I gained I gained 30 pounds, so I was up to 140 pounds, and in the military. I only had weighed 110 pounds when I was on the street at 6 feet tall. I looked like someone who was starving to death.
When you went back to your mother's before you went into the military, how had had she seemed to change at all?
Yeah, she seemed a little different. She had gone to college. She had her own house. She was a school teacher. Um, the house was relatively clean and nice, um, but she hadn't changed. Um, there was still a lot of blame on me. I don't understand why you left. Why did you leave me? Look at what happened. You left home, and all these bad things happened to you. Um, I don't know when you're going to learn. And it was still a very toxic dynamic, but it was better than dying on the street.
Mm. And was there a moment where you sort of confronted what she had done?
Not yet. No.
Not yet, no.
I wanted to have a place to live. So
Oh,
I talked to her about it.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. And so you joined the military. And what was that like when you first joined?
I joined the United States Navy, and I learned how to properly dress myself. I learned how to practice hygiene. I learned how to show up on time. I learned how to be responsible. I learned how to have integrity. I learned how to be part of a group. It was very uncomfortable for me, and I was very angry and rebellious the whole way, mostly just within myself because I was terrified of ruining my chance to get away from my life. But it was very depressing for me, and I felt like all anything that made me me was stripped away. And then I learned to submit to an organization, right? The United States Navy is just a large organization, and it has rules and standards. And I had not been really used to following anything like that before. So in a very a very tough love kind of way, I learned how to suit up and show up.
Did you manage to meet a lot of friends there, lifelong friends or anything like
Not
that?
in the beginning, though. I was too afraid that anybody would know anything about my past. I was afraid to let people close to me, not consciously. This is all subconscious fear. If they found out what happened to me, they would tell on me, and then the Navy would find out that I wasn't worthy to be there. And there was a lot. I mean, when an event ends, when a long-term event ends, my first thought was, okay, that all that stuff is over and I'm okay now. And then in hindsight, that was the very, very beginning. I was born when I joined the military and got away. That was where my life began. And I got to begin to unpack slowly all of these things that happened in my life and still act out in negative ways. I was still a full-blown alcoholic. I was still suffering from psychosis. I was still terrified that anybody would, I was terrified to be vulnerable because then everyone would know and they would shun me.
So you mentioned about the alcohol problem. When did you feel like you started to notice it was like an unhealthy kind of thing?
I had cravings at 15, and I knew that at that point that if I didn't stop, that I would become addicted. And so by the age of 16, I was a full-blown alcoholic. I had to drink. And I did experience delirium tremens too at a young age, which is a really nasty withdrawal from alcohol.
And being in the Navy, did that not deter anything? It just sort of carried on through that?
What was weird is in basic training, it was like 2 months long. I didn't, I don't understand how this happened. Maybe it's from being in a group, but I didn't crave a cigarette. I didn't crave any alcohol. It was like this big, huge shock to my system, and I hated every second of it. But, and I did get sick, but everybody got sick, and we just trained through it anyways. The Navy boot camp is not the most difficult training, but it's still pretty rigorous. Scheduled, structured, people yelling at you, trash can rolling down, full of rocks rolling down the hallway, the hard floor at 4 in the morning. Um, but I don't really remember feeling any effects of alcoholism during basic training. Now, as soon as I completed training and came to San Diego for basic hospital core school, I just resumed drinking immediately.
Mm.
So um, I did my very best to not allow that to affect my performance, but most of the time I was walking around hungover in a fog. And the age on base back then was 18 too, so it was easy to access alcohol.
And where did you go from there? So you'd passed your training, and you were now what was you doing now?
So I was a United States Navy hospital corpsman, uh, similar to a medic or a medical assistant, and I worked in the hospital here in San Diego at Naval Medical Center, and really struggled just to maintain normalcy, to match and fit in with everyone else, and to disappear, essentially. I just felt like this was my one chance to have a job, to have a career, um, to escape, to get away. And I ended up having a flashback at work, and got noticed by one of the nurses on staff. The nurse sent me to therapy. I started having to go to therapy. Um, I had to go get psych meds, and I drank on those, and I got arrested. And then I went to a rehabilitation center. Basically, I got in trouble, but rather than punish me, the powers that be decided that it was a drinking problem and that I should go to treatment. And so I went to treatment, got sober, got didn't do any other mental health work other than seeing a therapist once a week. Didn't really practice the 12 steps. I was still pretty shell shocked. I stayed sober a couple of years, and then I ended up feeling suicidal. I was losing weight, and I drank again, and got out of the Navy. was just completely a wreck, drinking and just wishing I could die. And then I met a guy my age who was sober and seemed happy. And he reached out to me and started basically showing me the program, how the 12 steps work. And being around other people my age made a big difference, who were sober and who were striving to be free of addiction.
Your relationship with sorry, what was that person's name?
Thomas.
Thomas. Your relationship with Thomas, did you feel like he was kind of a mentor, kind of like a best friend mentor kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, he would say things that made me really angry because I trusted the guy and he looked like me and he was, somebody who I was like, okay, this guy's cool. He's going to be my friend. And he would say, man, you're really selfish. I go, what'd you just say? Call me selfish? Are you kidding me? All these things that happen to me, how dare you call me selfish? And he was saying, well, I'm selfish too, bro. Like we're looking at how we are selfish. We are selfish, right? So a person who's deeply wounded, of course we're selfish. If a dog has a broken leg, all it wants to do is guard its broken leg. It's going to bite you if you come near it, and so this guy was very kindly and very compassionately reaching in and just give me little nuggets, and they hurt and they made me mad, but it worked. It worked. And I had told that man that if I was going to give this sober thing one last shot, and I would do everything he told me to do. If he told me to write down a list of everyone I was angry at, if he told me to go say sorry to somebody, if he told me to admit when I was lying, I would do any of it. But if I didn't feel better, if I still felt how I felt in 6 months, that I was going to end my own life.
Wow. And going back to what you were saying about the selfishness, it's like biologically as humans, we are wired to be selfish. We're wired to survive. We're wired, and especially when like trauma happens, areas of the brain for that particular thing, survival, are more sort of prevalent in people who are being abused. So, yeah, in a lot of ways, I see a lot of selfishness in myself as well, and yeah, it's just interesting how that works, and to be mindful of. I found to sort of think every day and try and be mindful. I'm sort of getting past that a little bit more, and
I
yeah.
would that we're actually wired to be altruistic. We're wired for community. We're wired to lift each other up. But when we're hurt, it changes that wiring.
Mhm.
Because if um, I'm very thirsty, and by very thirsty I mean I haven't had any water in 24 hours, and you are not very thirsty, like we just went on a run and you're a little thirsty, I'm going to take your water. You know, I'm going to take that. I will have no problem taking that water for you because I'm going to die if I don't have it. Right now, yeah, that's selfish, but at the same time, it's understandable. It's
Yeah,
understandable.
yeah.
So the trick is to drink enough water so I'm not dying of thirst. So I'm not taking your water from you. And I like metaphors a
I
lot.
was
It's
just
just
gonna say, yeah, I love the metaphors all the time. It's great. Yeah, that's a good one. That you have to write that down. um, you should make another book with just all your metaphors, and I think that'd be great.
I have a saying that you're a wounded healer, right? And the reason you like metaphors is because there aren't enough words in the English language for these things. So we are entering into a new phase of our existence, of human existence, where we built our technology, we built our cities, and now we're able to have more contemplation on individual happiness, right?
Mm.
Um, a lot of individual happiness is breaking this generational trauma that's happened to human beings, as a result of toxic living. so we can build all this shit.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, we're running out of time a little bit already, which feels weird because we haven't really been on that long. So I'd love to do a part 2 with you as well. Obviously, we're not going to stop just yet, but just mentioning that now. So if you're happy to do a part 2, it'd be great to
Cool,
do
yeah.
that. Just so we can go into it a bit more depth. And I like going off in conversation with you. You're very interesting. So, so yeah. So if it's all right, if we go back a little bit to your story. So Thomas is helping you through what you've been through in the past and helping you with forgiveness and these steps and what went on from there.
Well, I had an accident April 17th of 2001, and I was playing with a gun, and I broke some fundamental safety rules in my mania and ignorance, and I believed that that gun was unloaded, and I pointed it at my friend, and I pulled the trigger, and he died. And I had 4 months sober, and that is still a tough one. You know, I used to scream when I talked about it. It's been some time since that happened. Um, and I still can't really fully articulate what was going through my mind when I made that decision to play a joke on my friend by pointing a gun at him, which I thought was unloaded, but was loaded. But that fundamentally changed the course and direction of my life and of a lot of lives around me.
That's the end of part 1 for my Forrest Lang podcast. Part 2 will be out very soon, I promise you. But in the meantime, please send some support to Forrest's Instagram and go and have a look at his book, Angel Blue. I've read it, amazing book. You'll love it. I don't really read books that often, but it's had me reading it non-stop, like it's crazy. But yeah, go and check out his book, go check out his Instagram, his Facebook pages, all in the link in the description below. And I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you join us again for the next one. Yeah, have a good one.